Hello again, everybody. Welcome back in. So in this video, I'm just briefly going to go over some of the major points that, at least for me, were gathered from the developers question and answer session that was published here in DC Dark Legion's Discord. This it's October 22nd, I think it was. So first, I just wanted to kind of give it a run through, see if there were any hints as to what we could pick up as to what the developers are thinking about doing here in the near future for the game, given that we just passed the 6 months mark going into a year. And also because I find it kind of interesting that this is the first one that we've seen from this game. I have covered other games where developer question and answer sessions, especially in a written format, they're released a little bit more frequently because there's a lot of feedback that players do give. Definitely, DC Legion's Discord has an avenue to provide feedback, and sometimes the community managers do a great job in providing answers if they can give them to you, if they can find out something like that. Sometimes we can get hints, especially for those that have access to the BFP service, sometimes getting hints as to what might be coming down the pipeline, but they're pretty vague about their answers. One of the interesting things, at least for the first question here, had to do all about releasing new heroes and then building within the current factions that we have, or even thinking about bringing in new ones. So, because I've always wondered, especially when it comes to things like I have here in the background, and I selected the Birds of Prey for one particular reason, but this is something that I'm really intrigued about, that we have 7 heroes here that encompass this faction, but there is no playability here. Them alone trying to drive a composition is really not all that great because they don't do a whole lot of damage. They're mostly control type units, or boosters is essentially what it is. So there's definitely something missing here. For my purposes here, it's just like an idea here in terms of trying to boost something like the Birth of Prey. So I was thinking, one of the suggestions that I know I gave a while ago was trying to bring in somebody like maybe Huntress. And we have a hint here that there is going to be a variant of Harley Quinn that comes in here that could possibly boost this faction, maybe give them a little bit more damage. But given what just happened with the Halloween event and how priced out that hero is, there's no question in my mind that this one is going to be rather inaccessible for many players. Okay, so how do then balance that out? How do you make then factions that are right now in the game that have multiple heroes be a little bit more viable, and now you make them a little bit more workable? There is reasons to use them. Batgirl is mostly restricted to the Bat family right now. Poison Ivy is mostly restricted to Arkham's Most Wanted. Hawkgirl, if you can use her, might as well use her in the Justice League team. And then, of course, right now, the heroes that are down here, they need a buff. So definitely it has to be some workaround here. And that's what's essentially what they decided here to address, is that anytime that they do release a new hero, they're trying to build within the factions they already have. They're not trying to introduce too many new factions. And also they want to make sure that the hero is recognizable and that actually fits into the fold of the game. And they're trying to balance out bringing in villains with superheroes. And I understand all that. But one of the things here, for example, the classic one is going to be Harley Quinn, is why isn't she part of the Arkham's Most Wanted tag? Because she definitely could fit in here a lot better than she would with the Birds of Prey. But they had decided to give her a lifesteal mechanism in her kit. And so now, because the faction tag for Birds of Prey is essentially giving them lifesteal, that they just decided to then just restrict her for that. And then, of course, we have multiple heroes here. But the Arkham Most Wanted designations already share with Poison Ivy and Catwoman. So you could definitely bring her into the fold here. And that is part of trying to make some of these heroes a little bit more playable. So if Harley Quinn would be part of this, I bet you that she would find a little bit more playing time. And that is exactly what there was been a lot of suggestions being made in regards to that. So we have the Suicide Squad here, one of the more popular groups or entities within DC Comics. Why not figure out a way to round out this? bring in some type of healer or booster or somebody that can complement what this heroes already can do. And this guy, he needs a little bit of a revision. I understand that he's a mythic and you don't want to make mythics wonderful because you have the bleed and you want to drive those sales. But trust me, you would have more faith from your players if you actually allow them to use some of the characters that you have in the game and they're not shelved. They're not just sitting around because people understand that they need bleed characters to drive any composition that they might have. So I understand that, yes, you have the Justice League and you're trying to drive that, the Bat Family, and you're trying to drive that. Justice League Dark, yes, these are recognizable. Legion of Doom, yes, we understand that you're trying to drive all of this, especially with the bleed characters, the Teen Titans. You're definitely running all of this out, bringing in characters like Donna here. So at least they are taking the time to try to improve some of these factions, but they are still lacking in trying to improve the other one. So hopefully within the next 6 months, we start seeing some of these other factions that are already in the game improve a little bit more. And that's definitely something that I'm looking forward to seeing if that is indeed the case. For question number 3 here, essentially what it was about is how do then they determine which characters they're going to bring in, which faction tags they're going to give them, how you're going to develop their skills and their class, and how you're going to be designated faction tags. And I can tell you right now, given we just saw on the Halloween event, I'm a little bit jaded by this question, or this answer, I should say, because essentially everything that you could possibly draw from this, yes, they're trying to make sure that the hero fits within the lore, but that they add their own spin to it. Don't make them too obvious. Don't make them too repetitive to what the heroes that we already have in the game. So they try to add something to the character that would just look a little bit more unique, might be a little bit steered away from the lore, but they still fit into the lore. Connor Kent was the one that they provided the example here, but in my mind, especially when it came to a new tag, and I started thinking it was death metal, introduce that new, and then figure out a way to monetize the hell out of that character. And that's essentially what I gather from this, is that when they are trying to bring in new heroes, that is their main goal, is how they're going to monetize. It's not about really fitting into factions or how are they going to be drawing them out or anything like that. It's all about trying to fit them into the game, give them something that's specific to them, and then sell it. That's essentially what it is. So I appreciate the answer to this question, but based on what we just saw with the death metal variants that are coming in, this is a little bit too big, too obvious of an answer to give us in terms of how you are thinking about developing and introducing new characters into the game. Question number 6 is the big one, because right now the end game is suffering. Let's be honest. Everything that we have right now as it stands with the end game is repetitive. So essentially what the question here is how do you see the end game developing? And essentially what they said is we envision this being all about being PvP. But right now, everything as it regards to PvP, especially with some of the synchronous events where you need your league to be interacting all at the same time, it's all about jets, right? And so once they instituted the snooze feature on the jets, which just put them on cooldown unnecessarily, that kind of, made that game mode a little bit stale. Because if you didn't have a jet to launch, you were just waiting for a timer, right? Especially in a 40-minute battle. Do you really want to be seeing most of your jets be on 5-minute cooldowns? And not only that, now they have introduced systems with staminas. So there is definitely an imbalance here. And they're having a problem trying to iron that out. So as they said, we're trying to lean into things like Krypton Rush and the Guardian Challenge and the Ultimate Battle for Gotham and the Server Gotham Battle. But the thing is that regardless of what game mode you're trying to perfect here, they're all kind of feel the same. People feel exhausted by it sometimes because, as you know, in servers now, there is a dominant force. With mergers that just happen now, that is exactly what would happen, is that there would be one league that would just consume others and just push so much into the dominant scale that they would not allow anything else to be really competitive. So then what? The competition is down below between maybe two leagues, maybe a third one, if that is the case, but is primarily being dominated by one. So things like the Gotham battle, meaningless. People show up, do rewards, that's fine. They know that there is no going to be a balanced system to it. So why even bother with that? When you're trying to do this, the one that I would hope that they steer away from are where you're trying to get many leagues to work with each other. And hopefully something like this Absolute Krypton Rush event, where apparently it's going to be a tournament style, maybe that'll bring in a little bit of excitement. But I can tell you the whole thing about just concentrating the end game to be just a jet deployment mode. No, something else is going to have to be brought about to really try to, bring the end game back into an exciting form right now. If it gets too stale or remains stale, people are just going to quit. They're not going to bother with it. All right. Now, the other thing is that they were talking about new synchronous events where leagues would be competing against each other, but not all members had to be there at once. So you could just do it at your own free time. We will see how heavily relied that is dependent on, whales, essentially, and how much of an opportunity they will have to just completely wipe things out for the league. And of course, they keep talking about how they're going to add new stories, especially when it comes to the maps, the combat cycle, doing more training simulation type themes. Everything to me just seems like it's going to be all jet dependent. And if they continue in that path, there is really not going to be an end game. All right. It's just going to be, if it's just going to be the same thing and you just recycling particular facet of the game and then try to implement it into different modes by calling it different things, you're not going to keep the player base around. The last question I wanted to just go over, because it is hilarious in a sense, is that somebody actually asked if we're going to get a back cow. And this is I understand the fascination with the bad cow, especially after we just had crypto event. But I think that there'd be other characters that they could possibly bring in. But hey, listen, if the bad cow actually brings in some sense of joy and rejuvenation, is a character that is easily accessible and not paywalled as drastically at the death metal characters or the variants have become, then I think it should be a neat addition to the game. But there are other characters that I would rather see than the bad cow, especially when it comes to the bad family. That was essentially my impression on the dev question and answer session for this round here, and this is the first one that I've seen coming out from the game. So hopefully they do have more and they're more frequent. And like I mentioned, as other games that I covered, they do this every 2 weeks, maybe 3. 2 weeks to maybe a month, because they're always answering player feedback, and then you can kind of get hints down the line as to what comes out. This year, these 10 questions were for 6 months, and some of this stuff was really vague. But at least now, within that vagueness, we're getting an understanding of exactly where they're coming from and how they're thinking about implementing things into the game. So anything where it's said here, there might be new heroes coming with new faction designations, it's going to be something like the Halloween event. And when all this teasing came about variants getting introduced into the game, I really don't think that people expected how it was the event was going to be launched and how these heroes were going to be offered. So even if there is any hint that any hero is coming into the game, don't think that it's going to be one that is going to be readily accessible to you. All right. There's always going to be a catch. So we'll wrap it up there for this question and answer session here. I did find it interesting because I tried to read between the lines, especially with how other games have carried it as well. And from this, I can really hopefully, that everything that they do put forth is within thought of the community and the player base, and not all necessarily be about lining their pockets. But let's just see what happens here within the next 6 months, because a lot of what plays out here between now and the first anniversary will tell you exactly what you will need to know about what the lifespan of the game may be. Thank you all very much for tuning in and watching, and I will see you all in the next video.